This documentary will be about the forgotten technique of growing stone, rock, in the same way as we cultivate plants, and mushrooms in particular. Are these footsteps left in the soft stone? Do you notice this crisp edge here? It reveals how this stone was formed. It wasn't a lava flow, it was growing from below, rising pretty much as a dough does. Is this rock glue? Initially, I started my inquiry into this field because I was looking for an answer to the question, how were the meltoliths built? The meltoliths are a curious group of structures which many consider to be intelligently made megaliths. Actually, their general appearance is definitely that of a natural stone formations, but with one small detail. Here and there are parts, tiny small parts of them, which don't look natural at all, even to geologists. After I made myself familiar with the absolutely brilliant research of Anthony Aksenov, not only the origin of the meltoliths became crystal clear, but a couple of other mysteries also got resolved, like for example the Seda stones. Sometimes they are described as defying the laws of physics. No, they don't defy any laws at all. They defy our assumptions of what those laws could be. Other mysteries for which I finally found explanation are curious formations like the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, the split rocks, which leave the impression as if they have been cut with some sort of a precision instrument, artifacts found in stone, which, when put under tests, shows to be millions of years old, yet look at the year of manufacturing of this coin. And last, but obviously not least, an entire chapter of the most amazing story of the creation of our planet revealed itself for me. Even though I always knew that only a supreme consciousness can fashion such an amazing world and engineer such complex structures, still the actual details of how the Earth was engineered and how the project was carried out remained somewhat misty. Now the truth about the details of how our Earth, including us, was engineered and made by the Creator is emerging again.
The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 oh, aye, oh, aye, oh, aye, oh. Aye, 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 oh, aye, oh, aye, oh.
The purpose of this documentary is not to convince you that some unknown aliens have come to create all the mysterious objects and structures, but to show you that the forces of nature themselves are intelligent beings, pretty much like me and you. Now let's start with relatively simple looking species of stone. Officially they are called concretions. Although the process of formation, even of the simplest concretions, is not yet properly understood by official science, still, of course, this doesn't prevent them from confidently assuring us on TV and in textbooks that once upon a time lived a cute small snail, and then he died, and then around his house clay or other matter got stuck, accumulated, and that's how these balls formed. In reality, the concretions are much more complex creation than simply a dust which stuck to the house of the cute small snail. And it's not just the very complex internal structure, also, they tend to kind of spill out of their form, the globular form, to the point that they kind of fill up the entire space around themselves. And we are not talking about some rare exotic examples here. These are sites which are easily to be found all over the world by dozens. And not only these stones look as if they have been made of a dough that has risen, but also at other places it looks as if dough that has not yet risen has been inserted in some sort of skeleton or mesh or grid, and the soft dough tries to preserve this shape of globular circular growth within the boundaries of the cell. Now let's see what has the official science discovered about this type of rocks.
Orbicules are found in igneous, metamorphic, and megmatitic terrains, and are not restricted to unusual or limited compositions. Hypotheses of orbicule genesis include both magmatic and metamorphic origins for these rocks. However, no single hypothesis provides a general explanation. Some orbicule shells result from exchange of material between core and matrix. No correlation has been demonstrated between orbicule structure, chemical composition, or gross geologic setting. No single hypothesis provides a general explanation.
Okay, no hypothesis provides explanation. That in simple words means they have no clue. I say they don't want to have a clue. The clue is right in front of their eyes, but they don't want to see it because then it will become evident that many other of the so-called proven laws of nature that they have been telling us fairy tales about were simply wrong assumptions. I'm just trying to be polite. Actually, most of them were intentional lies. And as far as these interesting stones that I've been showing you, they're alive and they grow. And the proof of that are not only the countless similarities between the looks of the stones and various species from the plant kingdom, but also we have living example of species of stone, and these are the Trovant stones of Romania. Just look at them. What is the difference between them and the other stones that I've been showing you so far? There is no difference at all, just the Trovants are fast growing. The other stones might be simply growing slower, or they might have reached maturity. Maybe some different type of yeast, so to say, has been used in the case of the stones which appear not to grow. Appear doesn't mean they don't really grow, but maybe we simply can't notice it or don't want to notice it. So what is the mainstream explanation for the Trovant stones, or the TV explanation? Well, they're made of some special thing inside that is so dense that when you water it, it expands. But this concretion thinks that this is calm explanation because the Trovants reproduce as well. In a couple of years, small pieces of them fall apart, and then those babies continue to grow and become adult Trovants themselves. In a certain mountain region of China, they also have rocks which produce flower-like blossoms, also made out of rock. Locals say that the flowers last about 2 years. Actually, the very idea that a lot of the rocks around us have grown pretty much like plants shouldn't be even surprising to anybody, for the simple reason that rocks consist of minerals, and minerals, they grow. In just a couple of days, anybody can grow absolutely beautiful and amazing minerals at home, and all one needs are basic substances which are very easy to find and get. Not only minerals grow, but just have a look in what kind of shapes do they grow. The very same shapes of the stones I've been showing you previously. Actually, after all this, it would be strange if the stones didn't grow, and not that I'm suggesting that they grow. Sometimes even mainstream sources refer to certain minerals as being alive. This is a marine creature, yet another candidate for a living stone. Couple of minutes ago, I used a rising dough as a comparison. And it seems that's exactly how entire hills and mountains were grown. Do you notice how certain segments fermented, so to say, much better? This cannot be a result of, let's say, a lava flow, because if that was the case, then the bulges would follow the flow of lava, while here we can clearly see that they are connected with the grid and not with an imaginary flow of lava. It looks as if the more fragile or maybe even soft substance was supported by a stronger mesh or grid. We don't know yet which came first, or did they grow together. And here is your hill. It's ready.
Here, the mixture didn't rise well. Or another possible scenario is that it eroded to expose the grid.
Just notice how the mini loaves of bread are rising, while they retain the sides, the sharp, crisp edges that they had before they came out of the mold or the grid. I think on this spot they might have put a little bit too much yeast.
And again, compare with the minerals which use the same support structure to grow. And this is stone art in the real sense of the word. But a growing substance that rises supported by a grid wasn't the only option. There also grow rocks, stone, mountains, as mushrooms. As the cluster of mushrooms used to multiply, eventually they would fill up the full space. This is the famous Cappadocium. Officially, it is considered that these protrusions, mushroom-like protrusions, are just results of ordinary erosion. Namely, the cap that survived kind of protected the layers below, And that's why the layers below didn't get carried away by the elements as everything else around in that layer. That is the official version. But if you take a look at this portion of the photograph, you will see how the mushrooms emerged with their mushroom shape already clearly visible as the erosion advances on the slope. Although eventually everything was overgrown, still the stems remained stronger and continued standing, having of course a higher density.
And as you look at the examples of mushroom stones that I'm gonna show you, don't disregard them just because, hey, not everything that looks similar is the same. Remember that not only the huge stone mushrooms look like the mushrooms in the forest, but also the minerals. They grow following exactly this very same pattern. All the minerals that you see are not shaped in this way by a jeweler. They grow in this form naturally. And the rocks are not only closely related to the minerals, they consist of minerals. Sometimes even the terms are used interchangeably. And now, keeping in mind everything you saw till now, have a new look at the Seda stones. Some people also call them balancing rocks. Well, actually, many and probably most of them are simply mushroom-like grown stones. And why they don't fall off? Well, for the same reason that the caps of the mushrooms in the forest don't fall from their stems. The heavy top part of the stone mushrooms could be supported by the so-called maybe stone fibers, or I'm not sure how to call them, which connect, that grow from the stem and go in the upper part of the mushroom. That could be the case with some of them. Yet others, which have their top part completely physically disconnected from the stem, they could be still supported by the energy grid on which the stone was cultivated. But it is possible that not all sedas are stone mushrooms. Some of them could be supported by magical spell or somebody's strong wish. These terms again can be used interchangeably here. Choose the one that better resonates with you. But even if magical spells were used to create the support for a given Seda, still In practical terms, at the end, the job would be carried out by creating a supporting energy structure, again in the form of some sort of grid, similar to the one which the original engineers of the stone mushroom colonies used. Now, I've been showing you lots of parallels between the structure of various stones which were grown and the structure of various plants. Now, I would like to point your attention to how Wikipedia explains these structural patterns. It labels them conveniently as a product of self-organization. And immediately they suggest something poetic to you, spontaneous. Wow. And now I want to show you something super cool and spontaneous. Did you know that if you put metal and plastic scrap in your washing machine and some salty water and rotate it long enough, eventually the scrap will self-organize itself into a beautiful smartphone with all the softwares already installed on it. And what's the proof that this can happen? The proof are the assurances of the penguins that the first living cell on Earth organized itself in the primeval salty soup. Of course, the penguins have tried many times experimenting to create even a single living cell and always failed. But still I swear up and down, it is possible. You simply haven't tried long enough. Not only the cell phone will self-organize itself in the washing machine, but even much more is possible because even a single living cell is a much more complex system than a smartphone. And as far as real science, not the one preached on TV and in the schools, science based on what can be observed, till date, only intelligent conscious beings have been observed to be capable of designing and putting together complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems. The shameless lie that complex systems can organize themselves just like that, spontaneously, is a pivotal cornerstone of the belief system of the deceived modern man. It was very important for them to make the sheeple oblivious, unable to recognize the patterns which our benevolent Creator used in his matrix. In this way, they could install and impose another matrix, the matrix of evil, which does not overwrite the original matrix of goodness, but it simply feeds on it. It is a parasitic way of existence, and that's why all kinds of parasitic social structures sprout, as they say, spontaneously in our society. Actually, it is not spontaneous again, it simply replicates the patterns of the parasitic grid in which humanity collectively has decided to participate. And how exactly did they manage to introduce amongst the people this very important cornerstone lie that I mentioned? They did it with the help of very thick books which the common man can't understand due to the difficult terminology. And all that is described in these thick books are various experiments and mental speculations about how could have the primordial soup self-organized itself into these complex systems that we observe. Countless miles-long so-called scientific works are devoted on the question what kind of conditions were at that time so that they could have allowed or facilitated this self-organization. In this way, they waste people's time and energy into such useless topics instead of telling them straightforwardly. We have tried many times the experiment of placing the perfect ingredients in the most favorable and friendly environment and conditions, and they have never organized themselves even at the slightest to produce even a single living and growing cell.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems. And that is why we see the intelligent watermark of our Creator on all levels. On the level that we can perceive directly, the stones were grown and they have grid and patterns of growth. And on macro level, on planetary level, again we see designs which are not spontaneous, as they call them. For example, the landscape below North America is very similar to that below South America. The full picture with the small islands, the straight line, everything. And now on the topic of split rocks. Certainly some of them are divided in a way that doesn't have a natural feel to it. But that is only if we have a wrong concept of the nature of the stones as being alive and growing. For example, this is certainly a mushroom rock. We see the stems. And now see the split rocks from another perspective. The Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Certainly the most impressive example of the numerous stone structures of this type which are to be found all over the globe. So officially we are told that this is solidified lava. So has it been actually observed that the molten lava can form such structures, or they just assume that it might be able to do so and then sell it to us as if it is some sort of a proven fact? Because I think that the Devil's Tower actually grew like most other stones, and the grounds for that are the observations of how minerals grow. And the minerals, they are not just relatives of the rocks, they are not even brothers, they are the parents of the rocks. Don't you find it very obvious that since your parents grew from small children to adults, you would do the same? Now and then, during past life regressions, people remember previous lives of their souls in which they were minerals or rocks. And sometimes in those states of trance, they will find information on who and why grew the stones that we now call mountains or deposits. For example, this is how somebody who remembered his previous life as a rock described the human race from his perspective. For him, the human life was as a blink, as a short spark of light. The various civilizations which were coming and going from the face of the earth appeared also very transient to him, like lightnings. He would notice them for a moment and then they are gone. And as far as who was coordinating all this growing of the rock on our planet, well, of course, on a global level, that was a work of the planetary scale, nature spirits or nature gods. But on a more local level, it would be various keepers of the human race, or maybe somebody would call them local deities, or somebody else may find the term alien engineers more appropriate. And in some cases, even humans who were smart enough to be able to directly handle the subtle matrix of the original creator and manifest from it gross three-dimensional objects. Such people also participated in the creation of the rocks on Earth. For example, here we see ruins of the rock-cut cities, and in the vicinity this really looks like footprints in the soft, before I would say mud, but now I understand that soft young stone would be more appropriate. Do you also notice the typical bulging here? How the stone dough was rising? So I've been on 3 expeditions myself, and always this type of ruins were the main object of study, together with the vehicle tracks which are related to them. And it is now for the first time after I read the research of Anthony Aksenov that I can make some sense of it all. The footprints we saw earlier were in Turkey, and this is from the Italy expedition. At least the 2 places there were similar tracks inside the Via Cavas. They most definitely resembled the pathway for a rather large human. And again, it definitely looked like the stone was somewhat soft when this track was made. Maybe the stone hasn't matured yet at that point. According to the source, which channeled information in trance, the rock-cut cities of Goreme and Cappadocia were constructed, so to say, by people who learned how to live together with the living stones. Maybe we could say that they domesticated the stones. Now, do you notice the white layer on the top of the rock-cut ruins? This is not snow. It looks as if somebody covered the ruins with some sort of foam. The same source explained that this was put together on the top, materialized, manifested from the ether by the keepers of the time, the keepers of the human civilizations later on, when these dwellings were no longer needed. He said they actually archived them because an entirely different civilizations were about to come and populate the earth, and they would need a different type of environment, stage for the theaters of their lives. And so this covering protective layer of archiving was manifested from the subtle plane, the subtle energies of the universe within a matter of hours, days, or a week, according to this source.
The concept of stone softening, as a possible way the ancient megaliths were built, is well known. So instead of always looking for a recipe or techniques which could have softened the stone, how about considering that it could have been manipulated while it was still soft, freshly grown, so to say? Or, most likely, first the grid was set in place, and then the stone was maturing by itself in the given shape. But this is only a hypothesis for now, and even if it is true, it will certainly apply only for some megaliths. But as far as the structures that we've been calling meltaliths, those are surely rocks which have been grown.
If you now watch again my couple of videos on the meltaliths, just turn off the sound and only watch the images, and you will see, usually at every meltalith site, multiple signs that we are talking about rock that has been grown, cultivated. Now, why exactly will be different for each and every case? Some of them could be indeed old ruins, I'm talking about the meltaliths. Others could be simply rock, part of the skin of Mother Earth. And it will look that it has intelligent design because everything has intelligent design anyway. At other locations where the creations, the rock creations, the rock structures look pretty crazy, those could be rock nurseries or kind of rock laboratories, testing places. And yet other category of meltaliths could be simply rock which has been grown with the idea to be harvested subsequently by mining. Much more about this particular point there will be in my next video. For example, here we have very regularly looking plates on the shore, and then the lake is also suspiciously regularly shaped with multiple right angles. And this is what we observe always with the meltaliths. Multiple unnatural features clustered together, like a type of stone which is alien to the area, then at places it looks molten, and then the cubes are very regular, and then the stones would display strange patterns, and all this is clustered together. Up until very recently, it looked hopeless for me to find explanation of all this taken together, although some features of the meltaliths could have natural explanation, but only taken separately. And now, with this new information from Anthony, everything falls in place, everything. And what is this? Some sort of stone glue? Nothing can surprise me anymore. And finally, when did we lose this knowledge? When did we forget how to grow and farm stones, rocks? I don't know the answer for now, but here are some relatively recent statues. And if they have been made using this technique of growing stones, the answer is very, very recently. It's not clear for now if that's the exact technique they used here. But still, I'm showing you the photographs for your own consideration. Now let's pay a visit to the goblins. Mushrooms everywhere. Now look at this particular mushroom here. At this point, it is still, so to say, built in the wall, in the solid rock, which has not yet eroded. And yet, it is a fully recognizable mushroom. Stone mushroom structure. And all those other mushrooms on the right side, they have this form not because the bedrock eroded in some funny fashion, but because they looked like this always. Even before the softer feeling around them got washed away, or in some cases there might have been no solid feeling around the mushrooms as well. And here again, look at the bedrock, at the background, fully recognizable mushrooms. And here they have even dots on their heads, really like the plant mushrooms in the forest. But the actual reason for which I brought you here at the place of the goblins is because I want you to see how this colony of mushrooms looks on macro level. So even on macro level, it looks like a plant, like something living. Usually in such cases, the geologists start telling us stories that you see there was once upon a time a big spill of something liquid which solidified in this fashion. Really, did it spill indeed? What was it? I see no source of such liquid whatsoever.
So now, with this new information about how lots of the rock on Earth is formed, many of the mysteries, so-called mysteries, get solved. Like objects which look recent are found inside rocks. And when you test them in the laboratory, show the ages of millions of years.
Actually, the modern geology knows very little about stone. Here is a petrified lake in a pretty much modern shoe, cowboy boot. Now, how much of the stone on Earth was cultivated and how much of it has other origin?
Geologists have defined 3 environments in which rocks form. 1. Igneous. Igneous rocks form as molten rock cools and solidifies. 2 sub-environments are distinguished. A. Underground, magma, and B. On the surface, lava. Number 2. Sedimentary. Sedimentary rocks form as grains of sediment are attached to each other by a cement or by the interlocking of grains. And 3. Metamorphic. Metamorphic rocks form as pre-existing rocks respond to a radical change in environment. most commonly an increase in temperature, pressure, and/or an infusion of hot mineralized fluids. Fact or fiction? It's important to note that in general, these rock-forming processes and the environments in which they take place cannot be observed. Solidification of magma, most changes in temperature and pressure sufficient to cause metamorphism, and most processes that attach sediment grains to one another occur out of sight beneath the Earth's surface. They are, therefore, not observed facts, but hypotheses that geologists in the 18th and 19th centuries constructed to explain features of rocks that they examined. Exceptions include the eruption and cooling of lava to form rock, the transformation of snow to ice, and the formation of salt rock in evaporating saline lakes, such as the Dead Sea or the Great Salt Lake, all of which can be observed. Gradually, these hypotheses gained acceptance and became elevated to the status of theories. Today, they are accepted by all geologists. Our task is to examine the basis for this belief.
So when we put together all the information on cultivating rocks and the information gathered by the geologists, it turns out that probably most or all metamorphic rocks were grown, cultivated, and same would apply for some or all underground igneous rocks, as it was illustrated with the example of the Devil's Tower, and some, definitely not all, but some sedimentary rocks could have been also misunderstood by the modern geologists and could have been grown as well. Here is an example. So they're showing us photos like this and telling us, you see, this was bottom of a lake or ocean once upon a time, and as the sediments turned into stone, that's how all this was formed. Looks good, but only so far. But if we have a look of how the layers are stacked, then questions arise. Okay, this process that they're telling us of the body of water, the bottom of a body of water turning into stone, is a very lengthy process. So it means that for each and every layer displaying these particular patterns, there has been a separate process of forming it in such a way, which also, by the way, implies that the given body of water dried out. So what? Did we have like 40 lakes appearing one after another and then disappearing at very, very regular intervals of time to form all these layers? And there are quite few of these layers. On this image we see part of the structure that is still standing. It's made of these very same plates. And again, the stories that we are told of how the bottom of a body of water can turn into stone supposedly take ages and are not something that can happen within a season. Other unexplained structures, like the Eye of Sahara, may also find their explanation along the lines of the new information that we have about the cultivation of stone. The famous, mysterious, and again unexplained Potomsky crater also clearly exhibits the features of growing rock. And just look what kind of structures metals tend to form naturally. I think they begin to give us hints about their actual origin, which is probably very similar to that of the stones. The concept of growing our building materials is barely a new one. Discoveries have been made many years ago already. But of course, mass implementation of these discoveries will definitely not take place while we continue to live in the parasitic paradigm. These are one of the many inventions which will not reach most of the common people. It will not be allowed just because it will make our lives much easier. And then people will have time to think and they will have the ability to come out of the hamster wheel of being obliged to work like a donkey all your life if you wish to be part of the modern society. People don't even realize that it is exactly this fear that keeps them anchored in their slavery. Actually, if we want our society to return to normal, most of us will be losing our jobs, and this will be a good sign because most of the work will be done in a much more efficient way. We have already all the discoveries that we need. We have the star batteries that I have discussed in earlier videos. That means very, very cheap and almost free energy as much as we wish. We also have solar cars. The commercial models should have been manufactured already many years ago, but of course magically it didn't happen. Even the hybrid bike here in Japan, which is electric but also uses the power of magnets and uses minimal fuel. Also, the company which started manufacturing it somehow disappeared as well. And so people are back to the hamster wheel. Why? Because the television, the tell-lie vision, convinces them every minute that having a job equals leading a better life. The better life will come when most of us don't have jobs. And this is a good illustration of another pivotal and cornerstone lie that the mass media has implanted in the society. We are not to blame. The truth is, we are the only ones to blame. It is very much a matter of personal choice. Do we decide to reside in the paradigm, in the matrix of the benevolent creator, or in the matrix of the parasites? It is essential for the parasitic forces to convince us that we don't have any choice but to stick to them just to remain alive. And it is not at all by chance that the visionary magical plants used by our forefathers, who were free by the way, are now by chance mistakenly put in the same category as harmful drugs, which also exist, and thus the visionary plant teachers are declared illegal. It is not by chance that they offer decades of time in prison for those who use the visionary plants. That is indeed an extreme danger to the parasitic paradigm, the parasitic matrix, because the visionary plant teachers directly clean the malevolent software programs from the people who come in touch with them. The malevolent software programs installed in us, in our psyche, by the mass media and the society infected by this mass media. And keeping us blind about so many things is a prime tool used by these parasitic, malevolent pieces of software. And we have reached such a deep bottom of ignorance that the so called scientists, glorified on TV and so on, usually will tell you much less about the true matrix of the creator and how things are than certain artists who, from their hearts, will feel better the benevolent matrix of the creator and will recognize its patterns. As our desire to know more and experience how does it feel to live in the matrix of the creator grows, proportionally to that, the grip of the parasitic paradigm will get weaker. A powerful eruption took place in 1966 near the city of Donetsk, Ukraine. An estimated 33,000 cubic meters of molten lava buried an entire village along with its unsuspecting inhabitants alive. But the eruption was not from a volcano. And just a very short quote from a professor, a head of a national level university of geology. He said, "A volcano eruption in the most direct sense of the word. The scene around reminded me of the last days of Pompeii." The hill which erupted was not a volcano. It was a spoil tip which actually erupted. Out of the 580 spoil tips in the area, 114 have a molten core because of the chemical reactions which take place inside of these artificial mountains consisting of the waste product of the mining industry. And the spoil tips not only behave exactly like volcanoes, they also look exactly like volcanoes. So, in this documentary, I'm gonna propose to you a new angle, a new perspective from which to see various features of the landscape on Earth, which we automatically call natural, but in reality they may not be completely natural. At least in the sense that most people use the word natural in, meaning without conscious intelligent design or purpose. And just one small side note about the eruption in Donetsk that I just mentioned. Although it took place some half a century ago, it actually appeared in the news and in the newspapers very, very recently when it was declassified as a secret information. Probably it was made secret to start with just because they didn't want the people in the region and in general to know how dangerous actually the spoil tips can be. So amongst the various classifications of the volcanoes, we have a type called cinder cone volcano. Many of the cinder cones are actually big, regularly shaped piles of slag. Yes, that very same slag, like the waste material of the mining industry. So how do we know that all cinder cones are real cinder cones? Maybe some of them are actually spoil tips left from the previous advanced civilizations. Apparently, the fact that some of them can erupt is not a proof that they are real volcanoes. Occasionally, on aerial images, we can observe stuff like this. Hills or piles of different composition. If they really popped up from the earth, from below, it would have been expected that they would have the same composition. So later on I'm gonna return to the topic of the suspicious looking hills with few other types, but first I wanna show you the images that impressed me most and convinced me that there could be some seed of truth in this hypothesis that many of the landscape features that we call natural are actually very, very ancient mines. This is in Argentina, of course. It's a natural park officially, as everything else. And this is the photograph that I found really, really informative. Just look at these long scratches, these lines. Maybe climbers' gear could have left such type of scratches. Do you think that's possible? I'm not sure that's even possible because look at the sheer scale of everything. This is giant. I don't know how could have human climbers left such very long and actually very thick marks. So I spent a really, really long time looking at these images, and first of all I thought, well, maybe it is natural after all, because this seems to be grown, cultivated stones. As you can see, these typical spikes, this is how it was grown, farmed. For more details, see my previous videos on growing stones like living creatures. So first of all I thought, yes, this could be a natural erosion because the softer feeling in between the spikes would erode first. But then if we look more carefully, we don't see harder cones which get exposed by the erosion, but we see actually round drills. Here you can see my point more clearly. This edge here is also very suspicious, as if some sort of a drill was pushing the stone away. Was it melting it as it was drilling to form such an edge? And in addition, at this very site in Argentina, we have these high, flat walls. And this doesn't seem to follow the natural pattern by which this stone should erode. This is how this stone naturally erodes. It exposes the spikes. So the overall impression here is that this was an artificially cut wall at some point. And we have the same situation with modern mining. The wall is cut and below it there is a perfectly flat surface for the machinery to move on. So this national natural park may turn out to be a very, very interesting place. If somebody from Argentina is watching, maybe they can go and scout how is it and maybe send better images. This is at a different location and again shows the natural erosion pattern. The softer stuff between the stems of the mushrooms falls apart first, while the stems of the stone mushrooms remain stronger. And then the other image which really caught my attention was this one. I believe it's in America. So we have a perfectly flat wall which has eroded. Yeah, those holes on the sides, that's typical erosion by the elements. But how did this wall end up so smooth? And it doesn't seem to be just a small patch of it. Both sides of the alleged canyon are precisely cut like this. Yes, this looks like natural erosion. But about this, I'm really not sure. It's like polished, and at places it's even darker, reaching even black. Like Petra, by the way. Again, we have a wall of darker color, which seems to be cut before the fancy carvings. Again at Petra, cutting very high walls. Again with excellent precision. I'm gonna return to Petra later on in the video. There is so much material, it's sometimes difficult to structure the sequence of the presentation. So we're back at the American Canyon. I'm sure that the penguins already have a very entertaining story to tell us. How a river was cutting this canyon for millions of years, and it will sound very scientific because they will know all the millions of years with great precision, and with great authority will link it to other events which are equally imaginative. But the point is, rivers don't cut such precise walls, just perfectly vertical. And particularly suspicious I find those rivers which go across mountains, mountain ranges. How could they have cut through the mountain range? That would be a barrier for them to start with. I mean, how would they climb up there initially to start with their million years long erosion idea? But on the other hand, if a river finds a canyon which is already cut as a part of mining, yes, the river will be very happy to flow through it. And now these are images of actual quarries of our civilization. Decide for yourself if the American Canyon that I just showed you is more similar to these images or more similar to riverbanks. Again, notice where the lady is sitting. That cavity is really a product of the erosion caused by the elements. But the rest of the wall doesn't look like that at all. Now this is a bit of interesting picture. Yes, the boulder on the back, that could have split naturally. Maybe. But what about these cute round marks on the purple wall? That's kind of interesting. Looks a bit like a tool mark. Now, what happens very often during the so-called open cast mining, you put a monster in the middle and it tears up the earth around in a circle, pretty much like an amphitheater. Now, I would like to show you a few interesting amphitheaters from Antarctica. So, of course, every penguin will swear to that this is completely natural, but I stared at this image very long time, and certain questions started arising in my mind in relation to penguins and amphitheaters. Now, let's have a close look at this couple of amphitheaters here. So officially the winds were blowing, drops of water were falling, and the ostriches were singing as well, and all this accompanied by temperature fluctuations, and so appeared an amphitheater in the solid rock. If it was only one and it was so regularly shaped, I could imagine it. But with so many of them and all of them so regular, I have difficulty imagining it. But let's assume it's true. But then I'm asking myself, why is this edge so sharp? Was it some sort of micro winds, so to say? Was there a microclimate only inside at this particular spot where the amphitheater is? Cutting this amphitheater and the next one so precisely, and when they met they formed this very sharp and precise edge. Is it even possible to have so tiny microclimates? Such a small space, so that you have local winds which blow with such precision at a precise angle, and then a few meters away you have the next set of special winds which shape this sharp edge. No, it's not the winds, nor is the specific angle at which the sunlight falls on the rocks, because all the amphitheaters around, I see them having such precise edges at different angles. I don't know, snowfall, that also seems to be pretty much the same in the area, that wouldn't form such sharp edges. The point I'm making is that the force or the thing which formed this amphitheaters really seemed to have been in the center and working with precision. If you can think of any force of the elements that could do that, please let me know on the forum, because I could not imagine any scenario in which the so-called natural elements could produce such an effect. Whatever alleged erosion would have caused the amphitheaters themselves, at least should have smoothened that sharp edge. And two more images of the same region. Again, we have a clever river that cut vertical walls and then made a completely flat bed. And yet another image at which I really looked a long time. Now the author of the blog where I found it commented on it. Look, here we have even the tracks of the vehicles which were servicing the mine. I thought, wow, that's a bit brave to say. But if we look carefully, it may turn out to be true after all. First of all, if you notice, they kind of go down and then a little bit up in this area, maybe. Another point is that they start from the foot of the rock wall. They don't come from the right side where it seems the valley continues. And that would be the natural direction to follow if these were lines left by the flowing water from the melting ice. In addition, here they seem to really cross each other, which shouldn't have been the case if these lines were left by water flow. So I agree that it is possible, maybe these are vehicle tracks indeed, but not necessarily connected to mining, possibly connected to mining, but on the other hand, it seems that there is a lot going on in Antarctica. We don't know even what, so maybe vehicles are going to that slope for some other reason. Our modern vehicles, I mean. This is a modern excavator monster at work. Please note how the bedrock is cut at kind of a right angle. And then keep this in mind as you look at the next couple of images. And officially, of course, all this is natural. So, looking at these modern mines, all they need is time and erosion, and they can obtain the prestigious status of wonders of nature and become glamorously famous as their brothers in America. So this future canyon is already working on its goal to become a famous natural wonder. And this quarry looks like as if it is almost completely ready to become a natural park. Pay attention, how does the coastal line here erode really from the natural elements. And now look at the other parts of this very same coastal line where we have the smooth, precisely cut edges. And now again, look at these two actual quarries and decide for yourself, how similar are they to the allegedly natural formations that you are gonna see. Now let's have a look at the various manners by which the mining industry disposes of its waste, and then we're gonna switch to the topics of the European pyramids and Petra. So there is a whole lot of very questionable hills on Earth, like these ones from Yakutia, Siberia. They are hundreds of kilometers away from any road or any mining industry that we know of. They can have very regular shapes, and their composition is of exactly that of the spoil tips, slag, that type of material. And they can be quite impressive in size, just compare with the conifers around them. So sometimes the mining waste is piled up as a volcano, but sometimes it is disposed of in the form of long lines. And maybe that's how a so-called natural formations like these lines came to existence. Of course, that's not the only possible explanation for this particular case. It could be also some sort of irrigation system, like we have something like this in Africa. Every case should be looked at separately. Yet sometimes they don't make lines, they don't make cones, they just dump the waste like that on the ground. And after many years, those same dumps would look like these allegedly fully natural hills. And then those allegedly natural hills would look like this from close, as if they're made of earth, but nothing grows on it. Well, the byproducts of mining are often very, very toxic, and no wonder that they can remain barren for a very long time. Yet another way of disposing of the waste material is to stack it in the form of flat hills. And if eventually some sort of vegetation manages to grow on them, this is what we have: a natural mountain, so-called natural mountain. There are so many table mountains on Earth, and many of them are suspiciously of a very precise shape. Again, this is from Yakutia, Siberia. Far away from any infrastructure, no question of mining industry, at least by our civilization, and yet some of the mountain tops are clearly cut, and the stones are of very, very uniform size. And of course, the famous Nazca Plateau. Some of the mountains also appear to be cut quite precisely, by the way. And even if they are not made of slag, we have other options as well. This is a modern method of mining, mountain top removal. Of course, I don't mean that the mountain tops of Nazca were removed exactly for mining. I just want to show in general that there were many other races before us and they were capable of cutting entire mountains with precision for whatever purpose, mining, or maybe in the case of Nazca, for landing or making some sort of other installation that most people don't have information what is it exactly for. Yet many others seem to know very well because in China and in US we see modern installations plugged in to this type of earthworks. So it seems we, the ordinary folks, are being used as a maintenance crew, but the party which organizes all that on top level doesn't see a need to inform us what is the full project all about. So of course we have many different types of mining and some of them give us a byproduct chalk, and this is how the hills look like. The hills of the byproducts of this industry. And then we have the so-called karst hills, which are classified as natural. This is what we get in the search results when we search for those hills. Well, what's the difference between them? The only difference is that the first group look somewhat newer and that we know of their origin. And about the second group, they look usually a bit somewhat eroded, and that makes it easier for us to close our eyes and feel comfortable with the fact that we don't know even who was mining the earth before us. Here somebody was complaining how they changed the statuses of the hills from natural to non-natural, because if it is natural it will be protected, but when they want to use it for something then they put another label. But basically they're all the same thing, a heap of chalk that has been piled up. My previous video was about how a lot of the stone, the rock on Earth, was grown, cultivated intentionally, pretty much the way we farm plants. These are some parallels between minerals, which are very well known to be growing, and a couple of species of cultivated rocks. Here is a micrograph or magnified image of the surface of a leaf of a plant. Again, the parallels are obvious. But although I have shown that a lot or even most of the rock on Earth was grown, cultivated, these are some examples of grown stones. The small ones are literally clustered around their mother. But despite that, it's possible that some of the stone spheres have a little bit of a different origin. And here our concretion is ready. After it ages enough, after it matures, it will be fit to be declared as wonder of nature, and the tourists will take pictures of it in a nature reserve of the future. And yet another third possible explanation for some of the smaller concretions. These are so-called mystery artifacts found in South Africa, buried in geological layers which the penguins assure us date from the times when we were monkeys. And very similar bowls are also found in Utah. So just compare them with their modern brothers, which are being used in this type of installations, machines, used again in the mining industry to crush rock. And now on the subject of caves, look at this allegedly natural cave, and now look at this mine. Now as this mine gets abandoned in due course of time, the wooden beams will rot, and here is the result: your natural cave will be ready for the tourists to admire the wonders of nature. And it's not just the entrance, the inside passages of many allegedly fully natural caves, when examined carefully, turn out to have elements which cannot be natural. In other words, a lot of what we call caves are nothing else but abandoned ancient mines. Now find the difference between this mine, called the Pudnevsky mine in Russia, and the allegedly fully natural, of course, mountains of Sekret in Iran. This is yet another way to approach the problem with waste disposal in the mining industry, and as a result, entire solid hills are formed. This could have been one of the ways in which, again, so-called natural wonders have come to existence. The liquid waste material from mining is collected in tailing ponds. Now, it is entirely possible that some of the numerous salt lakes, salt flats, etc. on our Earth formed naturally, but yet on the other hand, many of them look a little bit too suspicious not to consider the option that they could be ancient tailing ponds. Few other points make some of them even more suspicious, like for example, spoil tips right next to them or in the middle of them, or the fact that many of them have perfectly flat bottom, which doesn't have a very natural feel to it. The tailing ponds tend to be shallow, even the modern ones, and tend to have very flat bottoms, just because they were parts of mine themselves. When the given mine got exhausted, they turned it into a tailing pond and started mining the areas around. And of course, as usual, now they are regarded as wonders of nature. They are part of nature reserves, national parks, and the numerous tourists are entertained by various speculative hypotheses, which all rotate around the same pivot. How could have this natural wonder come to existence? These hills in Iran, of allegedly natural origin, of course, are a very good illustration because they show both features together: hills that look exactly like spoil tips, together with the saline sediments right in their foothill. Any other hypothesis which doesn't fit into the box of penguins evolving from monkeys is rejected by default. This is also a type of waste disposal of the mining industry. Now imagine you fill up this substance in some sort of rectangular shape or container. Won't you get this result? And now on the subject of underground mining. So, is it possible some of the mysterious sinkholes, the number of which seems to be increasing exponentially lately, are actually the remains of very ancient mining or mining by other races? The official explanation is often very unconvincing. The hole that you see on the diagram has a proper funnel shape, which is the most natural thing to expect from a natural hole. In reality, we see something very, very different. Many of the sinkholes have remarkably smooth edges and form a perfect cylinder instead of having a shaggy-looking funnel shape. Moreover, the sinkholes are just the tip of the iceberg. Countless remarkably regularly shaped and sometimes gigantic tunnels are found on all continents, and they are given all kinds of names and explanations, all meant to divert your attention and make them look as natural as possible. And luckily for those who actively work on obscuring our history, they are very easy to keep under the radar even of the alternative researchers, because it's so easy to cut off the access to them. And here is some interesting information regarding these underground tunnels obtained during a past life regression session in the state of trance. The regressed person said, "Although we have similarly looking underground tunnels on various continents and they look alike, still, each and every one should be looked at separately. Sometimes they would use melting, other times they would just drill, and yet in other cases they would manifest it, translate it, so to say, from the subtle plane on the physical, kind of projecting it on the material plane. Some of them are entrances to the underground kingdoms, but calling them underground kingdoms is not so precise. It would be more correct to say that they are gates to other planes of existence. Down there is an entire grid, mesh, network of such tunnels. Some are also bunkers, ruins of mines, or simply a result of rock sampling. When they found what they needed, they would extract it, sometimes directly to off-planet locations, or sometimes they would first take it to the surface where it would get processed. Then the regression guide asks for further details about this manifesting the tunnels directly from the ether or the subtle plane. Does this mean that the stone dissolves back in the ether? The patient replied that you can say so. Also, you can do it selectively. Just take whatever you want and leave the rest of the mass that you don't need. It's not that such a stone will actually really disappear. It will simply stop existing for people like us who cannot perceive the other frequencies. In the past, these tunnels were passages to other worlds. If one really needed it or was curious, one could pay a visit to the neighbors, so to say, and have a journey in the other worlds. That's how it was in the past, and some tribes still keep the memory of these passages in their legends. But now, since the humanity got channeled into this more limited reality, such journeys are difficult or impossible. Certainly, you can't go with your current physical body. Maybe some people can go with their subtle body, but even that is not very easy. They are guards, and the access is very limited. And then the regression guide is asking if they were able to create this type of tunnels exclusively using mental powers without any technical equipment. The patient replied, yes, they could and they can even now. A group of them would create a field of light. Then they would direct it as needed with their intention, and the rock would dissolve. Not even melt, but exactly dissolve, pretty much like paraffin. It wouldn't flow down like a liquid. And by the way, there is extremely valuable hint in this regression session about the group of beings holding a field, creating a field with the power of their thoughts and intentions. And this is exactly the way we can deal with some serious problems that we face nowadays. Like, for example, the poison trails in the skies. If enough of people learn how to create and maintain the needed light fields, they could not only neutralize to some extent the effect of the poisons, but eventually even derail the full program of spraying, influencing the material world around and the events that happen to us with the power of our thoughts. It's not as easy as some New Age cheap literature tells us, just wish and it will happen. No, it doesn't work that way. It is somewhat more complicated than that, but it is certainly within the scope of each and every ordinary person. It's not only for people born with special abilities. Anybody can learn, and the only requirement for it is to wish it strong enough. And now let's get back to mining. So what these big machines do is they strip a thick layer of the earth. Here they do it even on 2 levels at once. And what's left behind when they are done with their job is really a barren, stripped, and perfectly flat patch of land. So, is it really a strange coincidence that we have similar natural, again, allegedly natural landscapes on almost every continent? Australia having probably the biggest chunk of it, and Africa is not far behind. How come they're stripped completely of soil and perfectly flat? We see that some sort of minimal vegetation does grow there after all. So for all these millions of years that they are always talking with great confidence in their penguin books, there should have been at least some sort of thin layer of soil. Where is it? Is it possible that these regions were devastated by such a large scale mining, so to say? Of course, it's possible. And waste products of such a large scale mining could be maybe in Sahara. Why not? For more details, see the Survivors episode on the artificial origin of Sahara. And if you think that it is a little bit too far-fetched to suggest that all the waste was transported to Sahara, just have a look at Mount Nimrud. Not only this pile consists of some sort of pebbles that really look like an industrial waste, but also this pile happened to land at a very strategic place, covering a historic site in front of which there are very, very interesting statues which suggests that the site itself might also be extremely interesting. And it's not just Nimrut, also the Nursuntipe that I've reviewed in previous videos, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, Teotihuacan, and so many others you can find in my videos and on the website. Always the same question: who put this pile on the top of the historic site? So we clearly have some party which is fond of piling up stuff on historic sites. So it is not so far-fetched to suggest that this party as well buried under sand what we call the ancient Egyptian civilization. In reality, it may not be really ancient. More information on this point again in the Survivors episodes on Egypt. And now on spoil tip pyramids. There is a choice for every taste. This is for those who like them Nubian style. Or maybe you prefer Teotihuacan spoil tip. Well, no wonder then that we have so many pyramidal shaped hills in southern Europe. Here is a full row of them. Is it possible that they're spoil tips? Of course, anything is possible. But from whatever very scarce information we have so far, based mostly on the Bosnian pyramid and very little about the Lapertus and the pyramidal shaped hill that I spotted just by chance as I was traveling in Spain. So my overall impression is that they are not spoil tips, and some of them were created, built in a way, while many others just look like pyramids from certain angle and are not proper pyramids, which was the case with the one I saw in Spain. Now, I would like to share with you my impression about the Bosnian pyramid, or at least the one I'm getting so far. So, up until very recently, I found it very hard to make any sense of this site, the Bosnian pyramid, because on the aerial images you see a couple of very regular pyramids, but on the ground it's quite contradictory. For example, this is shown as being cement, and probably it is. But I've been hiking in Europe in many countries, and I can assure you that in the wilderness you see this type of, I don't know what is it, cement or stone or whatever it is, really a lot. And the first time I saw it in the forest, I also thought it is that I've discovered a ruin, but as we walked for 5 more kilometers, it turned out that maybe it was a city, or maybe at the end I decided most likely it is some sort of stone. I don't know how it was made, but from experience I can tell you for sure that this is not a proof that this pyramid was built. Here is a mysterious wall in America, by the way. It appears to be made of this same type of beton, cement. Okay, let's get back to the Bosnian pyramid and the proofs that are being shown as of its artificial origins. So photos like this are shown and we are told this is pavement. No, this is not pavement. If you just look further on these very images that are shown from the side, you will see that this is a stone, a rock, and that's how it fractures. This is not pavement for sure. And in a little while, these very same layers turn into what everybody would call natural stone. So that's why I found, until recently again, this site to be very confusing and I never commented on it. And only after I found out that a lot of the rock on Earth was actually grown, cultivated, then everything fell into place. And now I understand each and every image I saw of the Bosnian pyramid. This is also from the side. Do you see the typical stone growing patterns? You have to see my previous video to understand everything that I'm saying now about the Bosnian pyramid, but now I'm absolutely convinced that it was grown. Maybe you can say manifested. Was it grown from a substance, let's say soil, or from air, or from sand, or as there are other versions directly from the ether? That I cannot say yet, but also pay attention that there are stone spheres, concretions in the area and at the pyramid side itself. And the concretions are definitely grown, cultivated stone. So there was growing of stone going on in this area. And guess where is this pyramid located? It's in America, exactly in that area with a lot of mushroom testing and all those buns of rising mushroom stone dough. It seems that that was one testing place, a laboratory on growing stone. I believe it was confirmed by one past life regression as well. So apparently the races which were involved in growing stone on Earth were already using this pyramidal shape. And in addition, this stone, the Bosnian pyramid, seems to be very similar to this one, which was also most likely cultivated. More details in my previous video and one much older video where I touch also the subject of exactly these stones. These artifacts were also found in the vicinity of the Bosnian pyramid and appear to be cast of some sort of stone, because two different types of stone mixture was used. Or actually anything that appears to be cast could have been also grown. Now this is also supposed to be a thick layer of cement from the Bosnian pyramid. This really looks like cement and only like cement. Was it also grown or it was cast, built in a way that is closer to our understanding? I don't know, but as a conclusion, my impression till now is that the Bosnian pyramid is made of cultivated stone, mostly or entirely. The artificial passages at Petra, which are in no way different from the Via Cavas of Italy, for example, not only are amazing for their sheer scale, so the first question is who did it, but also why? I mean, the sheer height of it. Well, I think we're still far away from tackling who or why about Petra, but still I want to show you a few new interesting things that I noticed about Petra. Now let's have a close look at the stone, which looks like as if it is molten. Let's see if it only really looks like or that's what it is exactly. Now first of all, pay attention here. Do you notice the cavity, the hollow space? And in front of it there is a relatively thin stone of molten-like layer. Now the penguin explanation of this is that the rain was raining and raining and it eroded the hollow space inside but left the outer layer. Isn't it amazing? There is barely any rain in Petra, which falls vertically down from the sky. But at these cavities, they have even rain, and apparently abundance of it, which rains horizontally to make those cavities. Now look here at the original layers of the stone. A reddish layer above, a whitish layer below. And now look at the molten layer on the top. Not only it is of a different color, and this color happens to be the mixture of the two original layers, but it also obviously and clearly has a volume, a shape of itself. It is not just a coloring of the stone as the prolific rains in the desert rain over there in Petra for the penguins to tell us stories, but this really was a molten stone at some point. And now please compare the damages at Petra with the damages which a brick wall suffered during the Second World War due to explosion and subsequent fires. Now please compare the damages at Petra with these formations which are found in caves where rivers of molten lava were flowing. Eventually the lava would solidify, and this is how it looks like when it does. And if you still have any doubts as of the origin of the damages on Petra, just look at this. Now look at the layers showing the original structure of the stone. Reddish, whitish, orange. Now look at the coloration of the brown and white river of stone, which started flowing when it was melted. This is an absolutely mind-blowing photograph. Really, a river of stone caught in petrification as it was flowing. Now let's make some general conclusions about Petra based on what I previously knew. It's all in this video, and the things I recently found out, which includes also the farming, the cultivation of rocks. First of all, the bedrock of which the area consists might have been cultivated, grown, or at least the clearly orbicular patterns on the rock give such an impression. But on the other hand, we can't be sure because the destruction waves of the weapon or whatever tool or technique or approach was used to destroy Petra also tends to leave similar patterns on the stone surface that it damages. Again, remember that the brown and white river of molten stone here has the very same kind of orbicular patterns. It is also possible that initially Petra was a fully underground city, and these tunnels with the burned smooth walls, they could be just an aftermath of the destruction. Like if somebody was trying to destroy an underground city from above and was directing some sort of weapon, it kind of made passages. And that's why you can see that in the video, which I referred to before, that there are a lot of remains of premises, rooms on the sides of such destroyed walls, and the passages are quite narrow. That means those rooms were situated exactly where there are passages now. And the destruction must have been carried on a really grand scale. Do you notice the poor remains of some sort of staircase here? So there are remains of staircase here not because the people were crazy enough to build parts of a staircase in the middle of the road or in the middle of the desert, but because the entire structure to which the staircase were leading is now evaporated, missing, destroyed, molten down, disappeared. Here around, its spare parts are rolling in the dust. And of course, structures like the so-called treasury belong to a much more recent era. And this is not Petra anymore. This is the place of the goblins, which we visited in the previous video. I actually think that the goblins must have settled over there when they found the vacant ruins of the stone growing laboratory, which might have been destroyed by the same weapon. Or maybe it wasn't even a weapon. Maybe this stone, because it is grown as mushrooms, maybe it reacts with time with some sort of natural element and produces this type of effect. Don't forget that this might have been a laboratory for testing species of growing stone. So maybe this one was not very strong, or maybe it tends to react to certain conditions in this way, or maybe it was too young, still soft when this happened, or maybe this happens to it when it's too old. God knows. And so, speaking of rock-cut passages, we are not in Petra or somewhere in Europe anymore. This is America. I couldn't believe it. Officially in Petra, they are called flood defense system. In Europe, the very same thing. It's called via cover, or at other places they don't call them anything. Just ignore them and exclude them from history. And here in America, they call them underground rivers. Wow! 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 Here they call them natural chainwork of channels. And that's on the home page. At other places, they are more honest and tell the story that this is a historical and archaeological site which was sold to a businessman who made it into an aqua park. Apparently even the penguins sometimes have some sort of shame and don't want to lie so much. That's maybe because they evolved from monkeys, and the monkeys have some shame. So, most probably various races have been mining on Earth, but that is far behind the horizon for the scope of the understanding of the modern man, who is not even clear and doesn't even care who is he himself, what to speak about inquiring into who are those others. But as far as mining and then smelting the ore within the historic time frame of what we call known history, that is the history that we think we know all about. Talking about that specific time frame, we were taught by those others how to smelt the ore and extract valuable elements from it. The proof that we have been exactly taught how to do it and we didn't discover it by ourselves, you can find in these two videos. Some people also believe that some of the product of the mining was exported off planet. Anything is possible, of course. I haven't seen such information coming from any reliable source, but it could be going on even now, just by looking at the price tags of various substances. It appears certainly to be unrelated to the financial reward that the miners receive for their hard work. And combine all this with the fact that we have no clue what is going on in space. While the sheeple are being entertained with fake computer-generated images about the so-called space missions, what is actually going on over there, we have no clue. They could be transporting stuff. This is a video of an alleged volcano allegedly erupting, caught on video. Decide for yourself, does it look like as if a stream of molten lava finally breaks through upwards, or does it look more like a simple explosion? Like the explosions of the spoil tips.
caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the crossfire.